Hello everyone and welcome to Recife in the state of Pernambuco in the northeast of Brazil. I'm really excited to be here. This is the biggest city that I've visited in the northeast of Brazil. It's a really great place. So at the moment I'm in an area called Pina in the south part of Recife, and behind me is the building where they filmed the film Aquarius, which is a film by a director called Kleber Mendonça Filho, and the film starred Sonia Braga, and it was one of the best films that came out a couple of years ago in Brazil. I'm now right in the center of Recife. I'm in the heart of the old town. So I'm actually at the point called Marco Zero. This is where they measure all the distances from in the state of Pernambuco, so it's a sort of key geographical point in the state. It was quite interesting. Last week, the city of Recife celebrated its 483rd birthday. And I find it kind of interesting because in the New World, they know exactly how old the cities are because they have a date when it was founded, so they can look back in the history books. But people often ask me how old the cities are in the UK, so how old is London, or how old is Liverpool, or how old is Manchester? And I don't even know how to begin to answer those questions because they're so old that there's probably no record of when the actual city began. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing, comparing the history of the old continent or Europe to the new world to the new continent. So this is the Capibaribe River, which runs through Recife, and here's a really interesting sculpture, and it's by someone called Francisco Brennan, and he was a ceramicist, Brazil's leading ceramicist. But he actually had Irish roots with a name like Brennan, you can probably tell. And he has these really interesting, quite unusual forms and sculptures that you see a lot in the northeast, especially in the state of Pernambuco. This is a statue of the Barão de Rio Branco. So this is a really important figure in the history of Brazil. He was the foreign minister in the early days of the Republic, so from 1890s and sort of the early 1900s, and he was actually very influential in negotiating the borders with other countries in South America. So you can see here it says Amapá, and that relates to a state that he negotiated with the French, which is a state on the border with French Guiana, and he was successful in his negotiation and the land went to Brazil. So I'm now in the artisan market of Recife in the old town. This is a great place to come if you're looking to buy presents for your friends or family, and it's all made by local artists. I'm having a look at the moment trying to find some presents, but I'm not having a lot of luck because they haven't got what I'm looking for. But the selection here is really good, and the people working here are super friendly, so I definitely recommend it. So this is a really interesting and historic building. This is the first synagogue that was ever created in the Americas. So it dates back to the 1600s or the 17th century. And it was actually created when the Dutch invasion happened, or the Dutch occupation happened in this area. And they brought with them the Jewish community, and a lot of the Jews at that time were working with banking. So they founded this synagogue, and it's now a cultural center and a museum. And yeah, it's the oldest synagogue in the whole of the Americas, so older than the United States. So it's a really important part of the history of Recife here. So I'm now in the museum Bonecos Gigantes de Olinda. So this is where they have all the huge dolls that they use for the Carnival of Olinda. So Olinda's a city just up the coast from Recife in Pernambuco, and they use these huge dolls for the Carnival parade every year. So they've got a really interesting array of personalities, and they create new dolls every year. So the collection is always changing. So this is a really funny museum. I'm going to try and work out who the dolls are and who they represent. So on this side, they've got more international people. So here we got the Beatles, Mick Jagger, Joker, Batman, Superman. And on this side, I think it's more Brazilians. I don't really recognize so many of these people because I think they're from Brazil. And I think this one is Bolsonaro. Right, so I'm now in the Museo de Abolition, or the Abolition Museum. So this is a really interesting building in the area of Madalena in Recife. And it was actually constructed by a Portuguese guy, Gilberto Freyre Foundation. And he created a sugar mill here, or engenho de açúcar. And this museum tells the story of the history of slavery and how it was abolished. So slavery in Brazil was abolished in 1888, and the regent at the time was Princess Isabel, and she signed the Golden Law, which became the Abolition Law. So this area is really important for the history of slavery because somebody from this city called Pernambuco came from Recife, and he was very influential in the process of abolition, and he was a strong abolitionist. So this is a really interesting museum. It's been here since 1983, and it tells the story of how abolition came about in Brazil. So this room talks about the problem of racism today in Brazil in the 21st century, and also about black identity and black culture in Brazil. And here are some articles from the press and the media of racist incidents that have been reported. So Brazil, like a lot of places, does have issues related to racism. And this is another side of the museum is talking about black identity and the roots of being black in Brazil. And this room has some art from Africa. So countries like the Ivory Coast, Ghana, the Congo, Guinea. So these are really interesting wooden sculptures. So here you can see they've got some really nice tiles from Portugal. If you want to understand modern Brazil, you have to have an idea about slavery and the effect that that had on the past of Brazil and the evolution of the country. And now slavery is something that's being talked about a lot in Brazil, in the media and in history books. The dialogue about it has opened up a lot, which is really good. And yeah, this museum is really interesting. It's got a lot of interesting artifacts and historical pieces. So I'm now at the Gilberto Freyre Foundation. This was the house of Gilberto Freyre, who was a sociologist, and he wrote a really important book in 1933 called Casa Grande e Senzala. And this started to explain a bit of the social history of Brazil and the history of slavery and the sort of ethnic makeup of Brazil and Brazilian identity. So it really started a conversation about Brazilian identity. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to film or take photos inside, but it tells all the history of Gilberto Freyre. So he bought this house in 1950 and moved in here, and he did a lot of his writing here. And in his library, he's got over 40,000 books, and he was actually author of over 81 books. So it shows his study and where he worked. And it's got a really beautiful garden out here with palm trees and pitangueira trees. And down there, there's also a memorial where he and his wife are buried. So before he bought it, it was a colonial building. And inside there is actually lots of colonial architecture that came from Portugal. So lots of tiles and really old antique furniture, which is really interesting as well. Hello everyone, I'm back in Boa Viagem now where my hotel is, and I'm just heading to the supermarket to get some snacks and some water. So one thing to remember when you're in Brazil, you can't drink the tap water, so you have to be constantly on the lookout for places where you can buy bottles of water. Unfortunately, a lot of the museums that I would have liked to have visited were closed because it's Monday. So here in the north of Brazil, it seems like most of the museums close on a Monday, so I had planned to see other ones, but I couldn't go unfortunately, and because of the timing of my trip, I won't be able to go to those museums, so I had to just make do with what was open today. But I still really enjoyed getting to know the places that I did visit, and I did manage to see the centre as well, which was cool. So one thing that I really miss here in the northeast of Brazil is peanut butter. I can't seem to find peanut butter in the supermarkets. They have it. They have everything else except for peanut butter. It's the one thing I'm really craving. So an interesting thing they have here in Brazil in the supermarkets is this thing called cesta básica, which means basic basket. And they have 10 or so ingredients for 46 reais, which is about £8. So here they've got sugar, rice, mandioca flour, brown beans, salt, soya oil, biscuits, corn flour, coffee, pasta, and one other thing I don't know. So they sell these bags of food for really good value for money. One thing that I noticed that I found strange in the supermarket was that they give you a plastic bag for every item that you buy, and the plastic bags are tiny. They're really small. So in the UK and in Europe, I think generally there's a lot of conversation about the use of plastic and more generally about climate change and about the environment and what we can do to become more green, more environmentally friendly. But that conversation, that dialogue, just isn't happening in Brazil. You don't read about it in the newspapers, you don't see it on the news, and people just don't talk about it. So I was kind of shocked actually. I went to one shop once and I asked not to have a plastic bag because I was just buying a bottle of water. And the lady at the counter said I had to take a plastic bag because it showed that I've actually paid for the item and that I haven't stolen it. So it's almost like a way of checking that you paid for something of having a plastic bag. So for me, that's kind of a bit crazy, to be honest. It's a bit mad, the system that they've got, but it's, you know, it's a different country and they've got a different way of doing things here. So, but I did find that quite surprising in the supermarket, the amount of plastic that they were using. It was quite startling. So it's been a really good day in Recife today. I really enjoyed getting to know the Gilberto Freyre Foundation or museum. That was really interesting. And so was going to the centre of the city and getting to know the historic centre a bit. Recife in itself is a really nice place with loads of history and culture and really nice beaches, great restaurants, spas and things like that to go out in the evening. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video today. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. All the best. Bye-bye. So it is raining very hard in Boa Viagem. And this is a typical tropical shower. Chuveiro tropical. So it started out of the blue really quickly. And it's actually really warm. There's like a really warm wind. And it's very heavy rain, but it'll probably only last for 2 or 3 hours and then it'll stop.